Follow Famous and Gravy on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen to Famous and Gravy early and ad-free now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify.
With Audible, there's more to imagine when you listen. Whether you listen to stories, motivation, expert advice, any genre you love, you can be inspired to imagine new worlds, new possibilities, new ways of thinking. And Audible makes it easy to be inspired and entertained as a part of your everyday routine without needing to set aside extra time. As an Audible member, you choose one title a month to keep from their ever-growing catalog. Be inspired to explore your inner creativity with Viola Davis's memoir, Finding Me. Find what piques your imagination with Audible. New members can try Audible free for 30 days. Visit audible.com/imagine or text IMAGINE to 500-500. That's audible.com/imagine or text IMAGINE to 500-500.
Hey, podcast listeners. Great news. All your favorite comedy podcasts can be enjoyed ad-free on Amazon Music. Listen to your favorite music plus top podcasts completely ad-free on Amazon Music, included with your Prime membership. Dive into a world of laughs by downloading the Amazon Music app for free or go to amazon.com/ad-free-comedy. That's amazon.com/ad-free-comedy to catch up on the latest episodes without the ads.
This is Famous and Gravy, biographies from a different point of view. Now the opening quiz to reveal today's dead celebrity.
This person died 2004, age 82. His big break came in 1967 when, at age 44 and relatively unknown, he won a spot on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Ed Sullivan. 82 years old. Ed Sullivan. Not George Burns, is it?
Not George Burns, but I do love that guess. After a particularly humiliating experience at a Catskills hotel in the early 1950s, he quit show business. The hiatus lasted for more than a dozen years, during which he began businesses as a paint salesman and a house painter.
Lenny Bruce died in the 60s. Give me another clue.
On stage, he portrayed a hapless, self-deprecating everyman slapped around by life and searching in vain for acceptance.
Comedian, right? The one that played Archie Bunker.
Not the actor who played Archie Bunker. That's okay. All right. In 1969, he opened his own comedy club in New York, and he was notorious for hosting young comedian specials.
Eddie Murphy's still alive. Eddie Murphy. Oh, Richard Pryor.
Not Richard Pryor. Oh, so close. All right. His first comedy album won a Grammy in 1981. It was called No Respect.
No Respect. Rodney Dangerfield.
Today's dead celebrity is Rodney Dangerfield.
How I first happened to start with No Respect was I actually felt I wasn't getting any, as a lot of people do in life, and I said what I felt. And one day I was going to an elevator, and I was going to the third floor, and the elevator operator looked at me, and he said, "Basement?" And I said, "Oh," and that night I went to a friend of mine's place, George Schultz. He owns a coffee house in Sheepshead Bay called Pips, and I told the joke on the floor, and they laughed at it. I said, "I don't get no respect." And I just wrote hundreds of new jokes on the same premise, and I found out that it's something everyone is looking for. As a matter of fact, the eventual goal, eventually, if possible, is to have a course taught respect in public schools, and then in perhaps 2 or 3 generations, you could eliminate the majority of prejudice in the country. Who knows?
Look what you started, it all in the club. Thank you.
Welcome to Famous and Gravy. I'm Michael Osborne.
And I'm Amit Kapoor.
And on this show, we choose a famous figure who died in the 21st century, and we present a new narrative. Most biographies focus on legacies and accomplishments, but we are interested in the journey, the process, the experiences. What didn't we know? What could we not see clearly? And what does a celebrity's life story teach us about ourselves? Today, Rodney Dangerfield, died 2004, age 82. Category 1, grading the first line of their obituary. Rodney Dangerfield, the paunchy, goggle-eyed comedian whose fidgety delivery and sad sack catchphrase, "I don't get no respect," brought him cult status and eventually wider fame, died yesterday in a Los Angeles hospital. He was 82. Your initial thoughts?
I mean, the man's already self-deprecating. Why, point out these weak features of him?
Oh, interesting. You're coming out the gates with the criticism. I loved this one.
Did you?
My initial reaction was I think this is really great.
Okay.
Let me start with the positives.
Start with the prosecution, please.
I love the visuals here. Paunchy, goggle-eyed, that plants a mind's eye picture very quickly, and even fidgety delivery.
Okay.
Sad sack catchphrase, I don't get no respect. They had to get that in there. And more than anything, what I really like is the story brought him cult status and eventually wider fame.
That I'm with you completely. I like the storyline a lot.
Let me spend another minute on that. Cult status is very cool. For somebody who we're calling sad sack and goggle-eyed.
Yeah.
And then I kind of like the ambiguity of how they dealt with wider fame, because he is a comedian's comedian. We're going to get into his legacy and importance in the world of stand-up. But he also had movie success. He also had a lot of TV success with Carson. So let's call it wider fame. I don't think it's a cop-out. I think it's right on the money.
I dig that too. I like wider fame because the thing you left out also was the comedy club and how big and influential that was.
Totally, right? And so it's you can imagine them writing this obituary and saying, do we mention Caddyshack? Do we mention Back to School? Or he's acting at all? Do we mention Carson? Do we mention that he had a club? All of it. And they're just no, it's just wider fame. And it started in a kind of cult status and became bigger than that.
We're on the same page. Just seemed like a little too many adjectives that were negatively slanted.
But that's what the man built his career on. Do you think it's undignified?
I think it's a little too much. You go paunchy, goggle-eyed, fidgety, and sad sack.
Yeah, okay.
Why four? Come on.
I think that was the thing we know him for. They are speaking to a character he played, not who he really was, right? The first line is what do you know him for? Let me just remind you what he looks like, remind you of what his demeanor was, and remind you of the character he played. And that character, frankly, extends into all those things we were just talking about. Comic, actor, TV guest, and so forth. So I think this is an excellent
let me
first
ask
line.
this then.
Yeah.
So is it necessary to say paunchy, goggle-eyed, and fidgety in order to paint the entirety of the picture of who Rodney Dangerfield was?
Well, I don't think it's just about painting the picture. I think it's also hinting at the humor. He's kind of funny looking, to quote Fargo. Fidgety, I think, is also and he had a kind of nervous energy.
Wiping the brow and sweating all the time.
Yeah, and all of this is to set up, I don't get no respect. So, I mean, these are all external descriptions of the visual of him, and all of it, I think, brings him to life, so to speak. They usually don't spend that much time describing somebody's physical appearance. And I actually think it's really appropriate here because he's kind of cartoonish.
Oh, totally. He's definitively cartoonish.
Because of that, it justifies the verbiage.
Yeah, so I'm with you on the work it does. It's just one too many for me.
You're a little insulted on Rodney's behalf?
Yeah, a little bit of heart bleeding, I think.
But should it have been just less words or should it have been a different idea? I don't quite understand your criticism. Is it just...
Should have just been less words, a little less piling. I don't think a different angle is appropriate. I think you said it very well, that this is the character that he brought forward and this is the entirety of his fame and how he influenced culture.
Yeah.
And so it's important. It's just a little much.
Well, so do you have your score?
Yeah.
All right, what are you going?
Even 5.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Significantly lower than I would have gone.
I can tell by our initial reactions. Storyline was good, just one too many punches.
I flirted with a 10 here.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm going to go 9.
You sad sack, fucking malicious.
This is what's going to be written about me now. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to go 9 for one tiny ding.
Okay.
One thing it does lack is there's nothing in here about his stepping away and then coming back to entertainment.
Yes.
And that's, to me, such a big part of the Rodney Dangerfield story. This first line does not get me excited to read the rest of the obituary. The first line of the obit should be, here's what you know them for, but it should also be, and don't you want to learn more? And I'm not sure this is doing much work hooking me into the rest of the story. And it is a good story. I'm docking 1 point for that. Otherwise, I think this is perfect.
So you just wanted an element of mystery.
Intrigue, yeah. Something that's got me a little bit more bought in on who is this guy. It's getting most of the way there, but it also doesn't quite really get his impact.
Yeah.
And his stature in the history of stand-up comedy, which in 2004, when he died, at that point is very well established.
Yes.
Right.
Well, the good news is we're going to spend a lot of time on it.
Yeah. So in that sense, it could do a little bit more, but otherwise I think this is an awesome one.
Okay.
5 is really low.
We're working 9 to 5.
All right.
That is not very low.
All right. Category 2, 5 things I love about you. Here, Amit and I develop a list of 5 things that offer a different angle on who this person was and how they lived. You lead.
So number 1, I've got to go the pause. What you alluded to and was in the quiz. I haven't seen a similar story elsewhere in American history of somebody that completely steps away from the profession for 12 years, as Rodney Dangerfield is.
Yeah, you should lay out what happened.
Yeah, the backstory is he tried to make it in comedy through his 20s, had flirted with minor successes, but also some bigger failures, and he just stepped away from the business for 12 years, roughly age 28 to 41, and sold aluminum siding was his primary business.
So you got married, and for a while you were like a salesman and stuff. This is inspirational.
What kind of salesman was he? I've always heard that he was
I sold aluminum siding, right?
Aluminum siding.
I painted houses and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, and is aluminum siding the ugliest crap in the world,
and
or
how
what?
do you get people to buy
I
that?
wouldn't say that. No, there were jobs up there. I'm still up there 20 years later.
Really? Do you have to go back and...
Remember, you did my house.
Yeah, they don't even care that you're a comic.
There's many funny stories I can tell you about that.
Where did you sell the aluminum siding?
I was in Englewood, New Jersey for 10 years.
Could you imagine?
I'll tell you something. So I sold people a job. You know, say that Saturday. Sunday, they're watching Ed Sullivan, and they see me walk out on Ed Sullivan under a different name.
Wow.
My name, Jack Roy, the real name, sold them siding. Then they see Rodney Dangerfield. So she says to the mechanic, is Mr. Roy so in show business?
Yeah.
He says, yeah, he's just setting aside, you know.
Wow.
On the side, Ed Sullivan.
Yeah, Ed Sullivan's the side gig.
Yeah, that's a side
so
to
even when you were back doing Ed Sullivan, you were still selling the aluminum siding, and people would tune in and see their aluminum siding guy on Ed Sullivan.
That's right.
That's
amazing.
That had to be
Weird,
amazing.
isn't it weird? And Sullivan let me announce it to anybody here want aluminum. I'll be happy to do it.
Is that right?
I absolutely love that comeback, knowing that there is a second chance, there's a third chance with that big of a gap, as well as completely sidestepping.
Yeah.
There's one thing to be slogging, but there's one thing to go try another life, realize it's not for you, come back and kill it.
I couldn't agree more. And it's something that gets mentioned a lot when people tell the story of Rodney Dangerfield, but it almost doesn't get quite enough attention. He's still, in those 12 years, writing jokes.
He is. He had this famous duffel bag that he would like write jokes and put them in the duffel bag for like if he's ready again.
I also like that it happened in his 40s. This reminded me a little bit of the Alan Rickman episode, where Alan Rickman doesn't become successful until Die Hard, when I forget exactly what he is. But
39 or 40. Yeah.
He's over. I think he's over 40. Kenny Rogers also had a sort of like success in his 40s. I really like that story because I actually think at that point in life that you're just a little bit more well equipped to handle success, to understand it, and to know like this is my calling. You know, I'm going to make the move for it now or never. I love that about Rodney Dangerfield.
Okay.
Should I go number 2?
Uh-huh.
All right. This is a little corny sounding because this is a very in vogue phrase, but I wrote create spaces.
Create spaces. Okay.
Yeah, and this is a phrase you hear a lot. Create space for safe conversations or create space for acceptance.
Your inner Brene Brown coming back.
A little bit,
okay.
Yes. This comes out in a few different places. One, he says in his autobiography, there were 2 times in my life where people said, you are absolutely crazy. One is when he decided to go back into comedy in his 40s. And 2 is when he decided to start his own nightclub in 1969. Like, it's a very risky business. He has to raise a ton of money and borrow a ton of money. And the whole reason he does it is so that he doesn't have to go on the tour and he can be around for his family.
Yeah, so he can have a home club to play at.
Exactly. And so he creates Dangerfield, the nightclub. Through that, he winds up becoming something of, I don't know if you want to say talent scout, but certainly mentor to other comics. Mm-hmm. The number of people for whom he had an enormous role to play in their career is astonishing. Sam Kinison, Jim Carrey, Jerry Seinfeld, Bob Saget, Jeff Foxworthy, Roseanne, Tim Allen, Louis Anderson, Chris Rock, Andrew Dice Clay. And that's just like a small sampling. Like, he became the guy who was championing young comics. This man created a whole generation of comics. I think part of the reason I wanted to say create spaces is that I find his humor pretty good, but not great. So I was trying to think of like, what about him is innovative, you know? And I do think that no respect as a kind of prompt to create jokes is really smart. And in that way, he kind of creates a way of thinking about comedy that others younger than him innovate on top of. So I think he creates room for a whole comedy movement, and he also creates a literal nightclub for a comedy scene. So create spaces.
Great. I think that is absolutely perfect for what I want to say for number 3. I think he's a loneliness antidote. And this is very much in the vein of creating spaces. So this talks about his whole self-deprecating approach to comedy and the I get no respect routine. It was pretty unusual when he came out with it, and still not that common. You know, comedy is a little more self-boasting, but with self-deprecation in it. Never is it 100% self-deprecation. And what I see in Rodney Dangerfield is he's expressing everybody else's like inner pain in a funny way. So it's just, you know, comedy is just
our struggles with pride.
Well, it's just our struggles with pride, man versus himself, whatever it is.
Pride and validation. I mean, this whole no respect thing actually sounds so corny and shticky, but it's actually profound. Like, we want respect in life,
Correct.
right? And in that way, he is embodying a kind of global need of the human condition.
Yeah, but it's more what that actually connects is with how that actually connects with an individual person or individual audience. Is that somebody going up there and explaining a struggle, however funny they may phrase it, allows an audience member to kind of feel seen. That there is a shared experience of, oh, somebody else is imperfect and they're being vulnerable, and I don't feel quite as bad about my own thought patterns or my own perceptions or my own frustration.
Totally.
They described him, there was a New York Times article, is that he was not only a jester, but a guru and ombudsman to the abused, downtrodden, put upon, and ignored. In a world long gone mad, that takes in almost everybody. Everybody can get into no respect.
Well, this is more Johnny Cash-like than I realized to hear you put that.
It is, but it's a different way. There's one thing to do it through guitar strings and a deep voice, and there's another way to do it through a nervous twitch and laughing.
Yeah.
And inviting people in and making them feel less alone.
So, yeah, that's all I was going to say. That this relates to my second point. When I was saying it was create space for other comedians and for other artists, you're saying for audiences.
Completely. In this era of the 60s and 70s, that's very different from what we have now with podcasts and everybody being open about their feelings, or as well as comedians going into these long narrations about problems in their life. This was way different in the 60s and 70s to be this open and this vulnerable about your pain.
Yeah. That does dovetail wonderfully. Okay, should I go number 4?
Mm-hmm.
This is a little simpler. Marijuana champion. I love what a pothead he is. I mean, this company, so he wanted to call his book, he ended up calling his autobiography, It's Not Easy Being Me, A Lifetime of No Respect, but Plenty of Sex and Drugs. The book's original title was My Love Affair with Marijuana.
Yeah.
I mean, he found a tremendous, psychic relief in pot smoking.
Yes.
And he was very early on with having a medical marijuana license.
This is like the only button in the country that had one.
Exactly. I guess I like it when marijuana works for people. Like there's abuse, and then there is actually a medical, mental health kind of service that pot can do. And Rodney Dangerfield, it just makes me smile that he got such relief from marijuana. So much so that there's like stories about him, as his health is failing, like lighting up in the
operating room.
Not just the operating room. I think it was like intensive care. Like he's like, and he has a story in his book about like lighting up in like airport lounges and a cop coming over. He's like, oh shit, I'm in trouble. And the cop just wanted an autograph.
Yeah.
I love his advocacy for like how great marijuana can be and how necessary it is.
Yeah, and it's good. I mean, it's a good part of the destigmatization story of marijuana, because he's not Jerry Garcia, he's not Jack Nicholson, he's your every guy that has struggles with neuroses.
Totally. And we'll get more into that, I'm sure. But yeah, I love what a pothead he is. All right, what do you got for number 5?
Number 5, he made old look fun. And you and I are big on this.
Yeah.
Is like, we got issues with this idolization of youth as the best time of your life.
Yes.
Right. But Rodney Dangerfield explicitly made getting older look fun.
Yeah.
It's like he made your 50s look like so much fun. He made your 60s look like so much fun. And your 70s, he's going around in a bathrobe, and the older it gets, it seems like the more fun he is having. Yeah. Just being himself and being free and being unrestricted. I just love that.
Yeah.
I I love that older is better, and older actually seems more fun, and in a very, very strange way seems more unrestricted. We're so conditioned to think that getting older just means more restrictions, and the less that you can do with your body and the fewer places you can go, or the more you can't say embarrassing things. And he was the exact opposite of that.
Yeah. There was one of my favorite Rodney Dangerfield moments. So are you aware of the story of when he's honored on Jay Leno's Tonight Show and Jim Carrey comes out as a surprise guest?
When he has a heart attack?
Well, he has a heart attack the next day, I think, on his 80th birthday. And he asked the doctor in the emergency room, who gave me this? Which is, I love that joke. And one more thing on the Jim Carrey thing. It's not like he had a small role in Jim Carrey's career.
Oh, potentially 100% responsible for
Jim Carrey's continued stay-at-itness, right? That Jim Carrey was this impressionist, and then he wanted to be more himself, and he bombed for 2 years. And Rodney kept saying, I want you to be my opener, and kept him on the road.
Yeah.
The love between them was really tremendous.
He was always there for me, always supported me, even when I was experimenting and no one knew what the hell I was doing. He was there for me. He still hired me. He sat in the wings with his balls hanging out of his, robe on the side of the stage, just howling with laughter. And I'd get off and he'd say, man, they're looking at you like you're from another fucking planet.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure if we'll be able to do it justice in this conversation, but, already kind of mentioned the number of comics for whom they owe their careers to Rodney Dangerfield. It's not even necessarily people who owe their careers to him. It was also just helpful along the way for so many people whose star was already rising. Okay, so let's recap. Number 1, you said...
The pause.
Number 2, I said create spaces. Number 3...
Antidote to loneliness.
That's really good. Number 4, I said marijuana champion. And number 5?
Made old look fun.
Made old look fun.
Okay, most Americans think they spend about $62 per month on subscriptions. But get this, the real number is closer to $300. That is literally thousands of dollars a year, half of which you've probably forgotten about. Thankfully, Rocket Money can find a bunch of subscriptions you've forgotten all about and then help you cancel the ones you don't want anymore. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that finds and cancels your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so that you can grow your savings. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's features. Stop wasting money on things you don't use. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions by going to rocketmoney.com/Wondery. That's rocketmoney.com/Wondery. rocketmoney.com/Wondery.
Is it just me, or has TV gotten really complicated lately? Thankfully, Philo can change all that for you. One service, all the stuff you need. Philo's got current seasons of the shows you can't miss, live on networks like A&E, MTV, Discovery, and TLC. Best of all, with Philo, you get all this for just $28 a month. No contracts, no hassles, just one subscription and a world of entertainment. So go to philo.tv and check it out for a free 7-day trial. That's philo.tv to start watching.
Okay, next category, One Love. In this category, we each choose one word or phrase that characterizes their loving relationships. Before we select our word or phrases, though, we review the family life data. This is interesting. So Joyce Indig, this is Rodney's first marriage, from 1951 to 1961. Rodney was 30. They divorced when he was 40. He remarries Joyce again in 1963. Rodney is 42, and they divorce again in 1970 when Rodney is 49. She dies in 77, I think. She is the mother of both of his children, one boy, one girl, and it sort of sounded like in both cases got married to quote-unquote do the right thing.
Yes.
But unusual to marry, divorce, and remarry the same woman and then divorce again.
Yeah, I knew a guy that did that.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then second marriage, Joan Child, 1993 to 2004. Rodney marries Joan at age 72. She's about 30, so significantly younger, and they're together until he dies at age 82. This seems very well verified. That I heard somebody put it this way. This seemed like a quote-unquote classic gold digger situation.
Yes.
And it's not that. That while she is a young, attractive blonde woman, 32 years younger than Rodney, the compatibility they had, by all accounts, is tremendous. So, yes, she made out well in a sense. And she's interesting background. I mean, she's Mormon and from a very conservative family. You know, her dad, after the initial shock, ends up becoming friends with Rodney. So it's a little bit like Kenny Rogers' last marriage.
Correct. And she was a florist, too.
Florist. I got to say, it's the one nice relationship in his life. You know, you dig into the family life, and there's a lot of pain in Rodney Dangerfield's interpersonal life.
Definitely in his younger formative years. Lots of abuse, if not directly, a lot of indirect abuse.
Yeah. Let's just go ahead and talk a little bit about his upbringing. So basically, his dad marries his mother at a young age. Then he runs out on the family, and he's a vaudeville figure, and he's not around. His mother it just sounds like a thoroughly cold woman and probably suffering from some sort of, mental health condition.
No doubt, it seems, has all the signs.
You're right. But so it's not abuse like physical abuse. It's abuse through neglect. Never hugged him, never kissed him, never praised him in any way, shape, or form. And he also seems like a sensitive soul who needed some of that.
Yes.
And so he is sort of left to fend for himself for much of his childhood. Some sort of deep, painful void is created in Rodney Dangerfield at a very young age. Yeah. And if you're looking for where did this no respect, sad sack, goggle-eyed figure come from? It's not a deep search. You find it pretty quickly, right?
And the saddest story within that was the kissing of older men.
Yeah,
you see that he would let older men kiss him.
Well, there was one man who would, in the neighborhood, because he was just sort of roaming free in the neighborhood. There was one man who, I'd call this sexual abuse, but he talks about this in his biography. He describes himself as a male prostitute, so he's sort of trying to make light of it as always.
Yeah, but let's he's 6 or 7 years old.
This is painful shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it leaves a lasting trauma. There's no question. And it's born out of a home life that has all this neglect around it. The thing is, while he is critical of his mother in his autobiography, he's not defending her either. You also see this a little bit with his children. It's really hard to understand what his relationship with his kids are as they get older. It does sound troubled, but he doesn't throw anybody under the bus. And even his first wife, he's sort of like, oh, she's struggling. And it does sound like when they got married the second time, she was suffering from debilitating arthritis. He had to take a bigger role in being the daddy on the spot, which is part of the reason he opens the nightclub in the first place. So my word was actually loyal. And it's sort of a tragic loyalty, but I think that there is a sense of obligation of I want to be there for people, even if he was never quite handed the tools to do it. I admire him for it, but this is what stuck out to me about the Rodney Dangerfield story. I think he struggles with love, and I think that that's true throughout his life. I think he does find a soulmate of sorts in a marriage that he's happy in, but I do think that there's an emotional distance that takes root at a very young age that not sure how much he ever is able to overcome that.
Yeah. So my phrase was life imitates art.
Oh.
So just specifically around the marriages and the love is that he was compelled to try to do the right thing, but it was not rightfully him, meaning it wasn't his inner self. He sort of had this conflict of being a free person, a goofball, and doing the right thing of staying married and being a home man. It felt like it was two conflicting forces, and it doesn't have to be. To Rodney, it was like, okay, I can't be happy and be a home body. That's the saddest of all, is that he couldn't find a way to be happy without having first had the outward success. And until he had the outward success, only then could he grow more into himself.
Yeah.
And that's his whole shtick. That's his whole routine, is that this person that doesn't get what he wants. But he finally did, like you said, his final marriage with a huge age gap does not seem like a gold-digging marriage. It actually seems like a joining of spirits. And maybe it's just somebody like Rodney, that's somebody 40 years younger with him is who he's going to connect with because he is that type of person. And I could say the exact reverse could be true for an older woman too.
Sure.
And so, yeah, life imitates art.
I'm good with it. I don't find his story all that complicated in a way. He talks a lot about where did he experience joy? Very much on stage. Not even in the movies. He found movies tedious, having to do take after take. But on stage, he felt a joy. And it does look like the second family of the sort of comedian tribe wants to pour into him in a way because they see that and understand that void. And he is sort of the ambassador for that kind of pain for a whole generation of comics. How much joy he ever experienced is not clear to me, though, because it does seem like he was in a lot of inner turmoil and conflicted for a lot of his life. Your heart goes out to the guy, right? I just want to say one more thing on this. It reminded me a little bit of the very first episode we did of the show.
Robin Leach?
Only in that there's a kind of big fucking joke around all of this, right? That if there's one sort of truth that Rodney arrives at as a human who's on a, spiritual journey, it's like life may be one big cosmic joke. And you and I think, are very interested in other ways of exploring spirituality, and I'm here for it. But I'm also holding open the door that maybe it's just a big cosmic joke.
Yeah, but if you start at the point of just big joke, that's all the bigger canvas to create meaning.
Yeah, it's an unlock in a way, or it could be, and it was for him. Okay, category 3.
Yep.
Net worth. Here, Amit and I will write down our numbers ahead of time. We'll look up the net worth value in real time, and the person closest to the number will explain their reasoning. Finally, we'll place Rodney Dangerfield on the Famous and Gravy net worth leaderboard. Okay, Amit Kapoor wrote down 30 million.
Michael Osborne wrote down 45 million.
The correct answer is 20 million.
So I was a little bit over.
Yep. You win.
I win. I wrestled with 20 for a while.
Did you? I mean, I guess the reason I went high is that there is Hollywood movie success where he has the writer's credits, and it sounded like the club venture was long-term successful.
Yeah, so I also thought I went high, and I did a little bit. I did 25 versus 20. So movies were not his thing.
Yeah.
He was a stage guy. That's where he got most of his money. Even Caddyshack, his breakthrough movie, he got paid $35,000 for. And he said it cost him $150,000.
Yeah, he lost money by being in Caddyshack.
Yeah, because it took 2 months to make, and he was otherwise making $100,000 a month by performing in Vegas clubs. So he was earning all of his cash, and we can round that up to around $1 million or so in the early 80s through live performance. You churn through that cash a lot. It's not extended royalties. I don't even think he got royalties from Caddyshack.
Yeah.
Back to School, arguably really his only big cinema success.
Yeah.
And it was huge. It did earn $90 million. He had writing credits, producing credits, and all of that. But I don't think it's getting replayed so much towards 2004 and to where his death in his final estate.
Great movie, a little dated.
There will be an additional springboard installed for Melon's dive, the Triple Lindy.
Is that hard?
That's impossible.
I think he did very well for the type of profession that he was in at the time.
Yeah, I think I'm very happy with that number because there is a blue collar element to Rodney Dangerfield. Mm-hmm. And if he were north of 50 million, that kind of puts him in a different category in my mind. So I'm actually kind of happy that it was 20 million because that's plenty of money. That is obviously successful, but it's a number that communicates that money is not exactly the point.
Correct.
Yeah.
So on the Famous and Gravy leaderboard, that puts him square in the middle, square at the 50% mark. So he is in how many people is this? He is in a 7-way or now an 8-way tie for 35th place at 20 million. Some of his contemporaries, Gary Shandling, Tom Wolfe, Gene Wilder, Eddie Money, Sidney Poitier. So Rodney Dangerfield had slightly less net worth than, say, Carrie Fisher or Bill Paxton, who had 25 million, and slightly better than Alan Rickman, who ended with 16 million.
That feels about right.
Yeah.
Okay. Next category. Little Lebowski Urban Achievers.
They're the Little Lebowski Urban Achievers.
Yeah, the Achievers.
Yes, and proud we are of all of them.
In this category, we choose a trophy, an award, a cameo, an impersonation, or any form of a hat tip that we want to bring into the conversation. What do you have here?
I've got impersonation.
Oh.
One Michael Bolton.
Yeah.
Do you know where I'm going with this?
I do, yes.
I celebrate the guy's entire catalog.
So Michael Bolton in the 1997 movie Meet Wally Sparks, which Rodney Dangerfield is a talk show host, a bit of a Howard Stern type who is sort of grifting his way around and makes his way into staying and going to parties at the governor's mansion. Michael Bolton plays himself and encounters Rodney Dangerfield, Wally Sparks, at a party at the governor's mansion and greets him with an impression of Rodney Dangerfield.
I tell you, though, I want went out with this girl last week. She was so ugly. I took her to the beach. They wanted to know what I used for bait.
And the two of them go on to form a friendship.
The friendship was before that, and that's part of why I loved this impersonation. Is one, it's Michael Bolton, which is just funny to consider Michael Bolton doing a Rodney Dangerfield impression. Michael Bolton is a lot funnier than you think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that.
And a lot more athletic than you think. Michael Bolton, well-rounded individual here.
He's been unfairly ridiculed by the movie Office Space, and which is permanently imprinted in our minds.
You know, there's nothing wrong with that name.
There was nothing wrong with it until I was about 12 years old, and that no-talent ass clown became famous and started winning Grammys.
Yeah, but the second thing is because of the realness of this friendship and the imitation. So I think it started back, Michael Bolton sang one of the songs that was in Back to School in 1986, and then they formed a little bit of a friendship, but Michael Bolton started doing these impressions of Rodney Dangerfield whenever he went on Carson.
Yeah.
And Rodney called him up.
Oh, really? I didn't see that.
And Rodney called him up and was like, quit doing these impressions of me there. Let's do them somewhere else, and invites him to come on the movie of Meet Wally Sparks and do an impression of him.
Michael Bolton was scheduled to sing at his funeral and was too choked up.
Yeah. I mean, that is such a weird picture to think of Rodney Dangerfield's pallbearers, because it's people like Adam Sandler, Rob Schneider, Jim Carrey, and Michael Bolton.
Yeah. Yeah. And I a little bit of, who was it? Was it John Mayer and Bob Saget?
It's got a lot of that.
Yeah.
A lot of that flavor.
Like a sort of unusual friendship, a little bit multi-generational, two people you wouldn't expect to be sitting next to each other who find this commonality. I love those kinds of friendships.
And to cap it off with the impersonation, that's my achiever.
Very good one. All right. My Little Lebowski Urban Achiever. Are you aware of the Rodney Dangerfield Institute at the Los Angeles Community College?
I am not.
It claims to be the only stand-up institute in a community college anywhere in the country.
Wow.
They are teaching stand-up comedy here. And here's why I love it. Community college. I have such warm feelings towards community colleges. I think I've told you this. Before I became a scientist, I did all of my physics, chemistry, and calculus at community college and therefore preserved my GPA. So I will always be like, community colleges can serve a great service to literally communities. In LA, think of how many people are like, man, I want to break into the entertainment industry and need training. This actually exists at Los Angeles Community College, and it's named after him. Sounds like they're training aspiring comics.
That's great.
Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
It's also like, it gets back to the blue collar thing with Rodney Dangerfield, right? I mean, the fact that he not only took a 12-year hiatus, but was doing manual labor, aluminum siding on houses. We're so divided in terms of manual labor and knowledge workers in the American economy nowadays that I love that there are still pathways by which, blue collar folks can find their way into the entertainment industry.
Yeah, I think that's the separation that I really like, because most comedy clubs or many comedy clubbers do offer stand-up courses, like a 6 or 8 week course of an intro of how to do stand-up. I've taken one before.
Yeah.
And they're very good, but it's a mirror demographic.
Right.
A lot of people, everyone around there is sort of same socioeconomic, similar kind of phase in life. But it being in a community college opens it up to a completely different world. And I love that.
And I'll say one more thing about this. It's something that I love about stand-up comedy is the purity of the art form. You don't need to know how to play an instrument. You don't necessarily have to be attractive. You don't necessarily have to have a strong voice. It's so primal in terms of like, all you need to do is get up on stage and try and make people laugh. That's no easy task, right? It looks terrifying and you have to be willing to accept a tremendous amount of rejection, but it is something anybody can do.
It's funny you said you don't have to be attractive. I completely disagree with that. You either have to be attractive or you have to own your appearance.
But it is sort of democratic as an art form.
I think it's more about presence than
oh yeah,
than you think.
Sure. No. I think that there's such a thing as natural talent, and I think that being present and how you present matters. I'm just saying anybody can do it. The same way anybody can do a podcast. Are we actually disagreeing on this?
I am saying appearance is, I think, a bigger factor than you realize.
I am not saying it doesn't matter.
I think it matters just as much in comedy as it does in rock and roll.
Oh, I disagree with that. I
and I'm not saying that you have to be attractive and look like a rock star. Clearly, when we're doing an episode about Rodney Dangerfield, that's not what we're talking about.
Right.
But you really have to own your appearance, and your appearance needs to match your cadence and your content.
100%. But what you are talking about is developing natural skills. And that, I think, exists in any and all art forms. All I'm saying is that you don't have to buy equipment. Like, the investment can just be a personality investment.
Yeah, a notebook and some time is really all it has to be.
Right? And that's the only point I'm making. All other things being equal, it's a fairly open playing field for anybody who wants to give it a go. Whether or not they're any good at it, I think, is a totally different question.
Yeah, and there is a purity and a beauty in that sort of analog beginning of it.
That's what I mean. And I love that it exists at a community college.
Yeah.
Okay.
What makes a life a good one? Is it the adventure you have? Or the friends you find along the way? Maybe it's pursuing your passion while striving to protect, defend, and save what you believe in every single day. So, what makes a life a good one? In the Coast Guard, we think it's all of the above and more, but you'll have to find out for yourself. Visit gocoastguard.com to learn more.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Category 6, words to live by. In this category, we choose a quote. These are either words that came out of this person's mouth, or it was something that was said about them that resonated for us in a certain way. You want me to go? You want to go?
I'll go. There goes the neighborhood.
Oh.
Do you know why I bring that up?
I do not.
It is on Rodney Dangerfield's headstone. He is buried in outside of L.A., and it says, Rodney Dangerfield died 2004. There goes the neighborhood.
Wow.
He essentially did a bit at death by putting that there. He made that joke when he bought the plot, is like, I'm going to get this cemetery plot, and there goes the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But it was, Rodney.
Yeah.
You know, it's such the outsider's way in.
Yeah.
And that was his bit. That was also so much of him, you know, to go back to the first line of the obituary of Paunchy and Sad Sack, but it's an outsider making it in, you know, and in his movies and Caddyshack, that was exactly his character. And Back to School, it's all of just anybody can kind of go in and disrupt.
A kind of barging in, sort of.
Yeah, and there goes the neighborhood. The origins of it, you know, do go back to like racial integration.
Do they? I was wondering that. I didn't know, but
I definitely like went down rabbit holes on this. But the first published uses of it were always almost in mockery, like in the satirical way.
Yeah.
And that's what Rodney Dangerfield did. He came in, shook things up, took institutions that were otherwise sacred or thought to be a certain thing, and brought his own style.
Very well said. That's beautiful. All right. Mine?
Yes.
You'll figure it out.
Okay.
So Jerry Seinfeld, when he's a young comic, has a lot of admiration for Rodney Dangerfield.
And I went up to him and, you know, he didn't know who I was. I was just in the bar standing there. And I go, could you give me some advice about how to be a comedian? And he went, you'll figure it out. That's the kind of weird thing about stand-up comedy is like, nobody can help you. It's like being a newborn calf. The cow can't say, here's how you walk. It's just like, figure it out, you know?
And here's why I love it. It's actually a vote of confidence. I have faith in you. You'll figure this out. It's also simple and elegant, like just do it. Just figure it out. You are funny. I believe in you. Let's not overthink it too much because we could overthink it.
Yeah.
You'll figure it out.
It's such a powerful phrase when it comes from somebody of authority and a higher status.
Exactly. And somebody who's known for mentorship, right? You can hear it being received with such a truth to it.
Yeah. Because there's two ways to do it, right? There's the you'll figure it out. You see somebody like struggling with something mechanical and, you know, a careless father is like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah.
But then you have this other mentor type of figure that puts an arm on your shoulder and it was like, you'll figure it out.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's dismissive.
No,
at least
not
the way
at all.
Jerry Seinfeld tells it. And it could be misinterpreted as dismissive. But if you're, you know, when the student is ready, the teacher appears, and this is the lesson.
Yeah. Intonation and gesturing has a huge part of it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you. Okay. Category 7, man in the mirror. This category is fairly simple. Did this person like their reflection, yes or no? This is not about beauty, but rather a question of self-confidence versus self-judgment.
If he woke up every morning and had to read paunchy, goggly-eyed, sad sack, fidgety, that could do a little bit of damage.
I went with there's no way he liked his reflection in the mirror. Yeah, I didn't think about this. Are you gonna make a case for he liked it?
Yeah, huge thumbs up all the way.
I went with the obvious sort of. I mean, because there is evidence of self-abuse in a lot of different ways. I'm championing his marijuana consumption. I'm not quite on the same page when it comes to his cocaine consumption.
And alcoholism.
To some extent, I think. I don't know if I'd go that far.
Maybe
but
it wasn't alcoholism.
Certainly heavy drinking. He's right on that line. And absolutely, lifelong smoker, struggled to get in shape and stay in shape and take care of his body. I mean, he did stay away from heroin, thank God, even though he watched Lenny Bruce shoot up. Did you see this story?
No.
Yeah, so he and Lenny came up together.
That's what's so funny. Lenny seems so much older than Rodney.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I was going to say that one thing about Rodney Dangerfield is he's a little bit Burt Reynolds-like in being a bridge figure of generations in the entertainment industry. I mean, I'm not sure we did it justice in the Burt Reynolds episode. He really came up with golden age of Hollywood kind of people and was just a little younger, but we associate him with this next generation of actors. Same thing with Rodney Dangerfield and comedy. I mean, he was contemporaries with, Lenny Bruce and Carlin and Cosby and all these throwbacks, but then he gets associated with people who hit it a generation later, Saget and Adam Sandler and
correct. I mean, I think the reason
Jim
his
Carrey.
pallbearers were people like Adam Sandler and Bob Saget is because the Lenny Bruces and so forth were dead already.
Yes,
because
exactly.
a lot of them lived these more reckless lifestyles than Rodney and didn't make it into their 80s.
Well, and honestly, he was lucky to make it as long as he did,
Totally.
the way he treated his body. Yeah, I think he's just a goofy looking guy.
Okay. All right. My take, completely different.
All right.
So I think to have a self-deprecating sense of humor, you have to like yourself.
I need to sit with that one for a second.
Okay, you sit with that, and you can come back as I continue to talk about it.
Let's hear this out. Are you saying that as a truth, or are you going to argue that case?
I'm saying it as a truth, but I can provide an argument for it. There's one argument that you can say, okay, you just want to get out in front of the insult before somebody else.
That's where I'm going. It's a defense mechanism. Yeah, I'll make fun of me before anybody else does. That way, it doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah, that is one possible interpretation. If you're the kid in the classroom, maybe. If you're a guy getting on huge stages, it is your confidence. Your self-deprecation is your confidence, and it's your ownership of yourself and your narrative. And it's the same thing that allows you to look yourself in the mirror and say, whatever irregularity I may have, whatever goggly-eyed or little or
sad sackness,
but it's ownership of it, is that I've got this narrative, I know who I am. And with it, I think there comes quite a bit of liking yourself. Rodney Dangerfield also, this guy is so self-made, although his father was this absentee vaudevillian comic. They say essentially he had no inborn ability to be funny.
Yeah.
He just kept trying and honing, and they said, he did it with the rigor of an engineer, the way that he honed jokes, and he reduced everything down to just a line and timing.
I admire his work ethic more than I envy his natural genius, because I think he's funny, but I think it's funny born out of hard work.
Yeah, well, exactly. So there should be a hell of a lot of pride in that. And I think he had it, although he struggled with depression and his whole gig was, I get no respect.
Yeah.
I do not see any possibility that he did not feel good enough about himself to be self-deprecating, and he took pride in this road traveled.
Okay, so I like the argument. We're definitely going to agree to disagree on this, because I ultimately think he developed a sort of steel iron inside from his upbringing. I do think that this is the consequence of a troubled childhood, not born out of confidence, although those things are hard to distinguish. I do see your point, and I do think that there is a pride and a confidence that can exist even if it comes from a problematic root. I just don't see it.
God, I don't know, man. We're seeing this so differently. It's like to be a goggly-eyed, paunchy, sad sack fidgety, but to be the worldwide sensation and that important of an institution in comedy, entertainment, and most importantly, all of these individual lives, despite these adjectives at the beginning of your obituary.
Yeah.
I sense a greater triumph above words and figure.
I do too. I just don't think it necessarily translates to the visual of I'm looking myself in the mirror today and here's what I see. But maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. You've moved me.
The best we can do is triangulate to our best approximation of what we see in other signs that would tell us of how he perceives them.
What's interesting, though, is how emphatic you are about, like, I really think he liked his reflection on some level, in as much as he was, like, capable of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
And he's also a guy that when he gave an interview, like an actual real interview, it was as himself. He's very contemplative, very self-reflective. He's done a lot of self-work over time, you know, that didn't necessarily slow down the drinking and the pot and the coke, but he's been
a
there.
Psychiatrist is like, smoke away. I mean, you know, if you're finding relief, you know, and which I think makes sense.
I too have had a psychiatrist tell me that.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, beautiful. I wish I had. I need to. Can you give me his name?
No, I cannot.
Okay, probably meant for the best. All right, so you're a yes, he liked it. I'm a no, he didn't. And I think we need to leave it there.
Okay.
Category 8, coffee, cocktail, or cannabis. This is where we ask, which one would we most want to do with our dead celebrity? This may be a question of what drug sounds like the most fun to partake with this person, or another philosophy is that a particular kind of drug might allow access to a part of them we're most curious about. Shall I lead?
Yeah.
Okay, cannabis, 100%.
Because you don't even have to light it. He's already like...
No, it's actually more than that. So... somebody who's a heavy drinker, like I don't want to drink with them, right? Because I see it all turned inward. But people who actually smoke a ton of pot and you can actually see and feel the relief, I'm a little envious of that.
Yeah.
I mean, Doug Benson comes to mind as somebody who makes me want to get high, even though he's high every day. There's nothing like unique, or Willie for that matter. Willie Nelson, you know.
Snoop Dogg.
Yeah. I mean, they make pot look pretty good. And I do think that it clearly does something important for him. And I kind of like seeing that work. It makes it look attractive to me. It's not an unlock necessarily. I just want, you know, a version of him that he likes more. And so, yeah, I didn't overthink this. I'd love to smoke a joint with Rodney Dangerfield.
And any topics you want to go into, or just hanging out?
I think it's probably just hanging out. I don't need to go anywhere philosophical necessarily. I think I probably would enjoy hearing some, like, when was the first time you saw Sam Kinison? There was a young comedian special where Rodney Dangerfield introduces Bill Hicks. I'd like to know his first impressions of Bill Hicks, who's my favorite comic. You know, I'd like to hear him break down what works about somebody's act. You don't see him being very analytical about that. And one thing about his comedy, it is very much like joke setup. It's very old school that way. It's not storytelling, right? Which is kind of the comedy I go for.
We were raised on that.
Totally. And yeah, I don't know to need to go deep here. I think what he wants from people is an acceptance of who he is. And I think the marijuana would help him and would probably help me.
Yeah. So I went cocktail, but probably the first cocktail. You know, I don't want to be there for like the sixth cocktail. I want to be in the... Yeah. Well, I mean, probably yes, but what's especially important to me is that first one. And I think I just have one question for him. It is, what gives you joy?
Yeah.
Because it's so unclear because of this huge amount of success, the self-deprecation, which I have argued is potentially a good thing. This straight man in the interviews of like being very pontificating, being very open about dealing with depression for a good bit of his life, and that's a reason for the marijuana. But clearly, you can't fake the smiles and the laughs, right? Because he had them, and he had some awesome moments, and you see him cracking people up and loving it and really getting into flow. But he's such an enigma because of this really tough childhood, the struggles with his own depression and with substances and this whole man versus himself. But there is definitely a lot of joy in there. You just cannot spot exactly when it's coming out and when it's fully inhabited by him. And so I just want to know when he feels it most.
Do you think he's ever asked himself that question?
I don't see how not. A guy that's that introspective.
Well, hang on. I want to linger on this for a second, because this continues to actually be something that has been a real journey for me since I sobered up.
Okay.
I didn't realize that I didn't know how to experience happiness.
Without a substance.
Yeah, and I know how to experience joy. That my whole idea of fun was built around getting fucked up, right? And that I am still, you know, almost 11 years sober now, learning how to know when joy is upon me. You know, part of it is I have this idea that if I'm happy in the moment, this means I'm now going to have a happy life. I quickly project it into the future. I quickly try and take that emotion as future condition, which is weird. But I think a lot of people do that. Also, when something beautiful is happening, when I'm playing with my kids and they're, being playful and joyful, when I'm connecting with my wife in a great conversation, when you and I are like in having like a good chat about whatever dead celebrity or whatever, I don't always know, hey, Michael, this is joy. This is fun. This is what happiness looks like. I don't always recognize that. And I think if you struggle in the way that I'm saying I did, but also and do, in the way that Rodney Dangerfield does, I actually don't think it's as simple as a question as you might assume. Are you experiencing joy, and can you tell when you are, and can you allow it, right? So that's why I asked the question. Do you think he asked himself that question? But is that the conversation you want to have over a drink?
That is. And I think he has an answer. And I think part of this of like working until he dies and that knowing that is what keeps him moving, I think he has some sense of what his inner drivers of joy are.
I actually agree with that. There's something about in the interviews, you sometimes see a kind of straightforwardness. It's sort of like the Jerry Seinfeld thing. You'll figure it out. Like some things are not that complicated.
Yeah.
And I actually think he's got an intuition about that. All right. Final category, the Vanderbeek, named after James Vanderbeek, who famously said in Varsity Blues,
I don't want your life.
Amit, what is the case for wanting Rodney Dangerfield's life?
Well, we're going to answer this together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. There's a lot here, actually. I thought this was going to be a harder case to make. There's some hard stuff here.
There is some hard stuff, but I don't think
there's a lot of pain and,
Yeah, I don't think it's that hard, though. I'll start with one, which was where I was going in. One of my 5 things I love about you was his making old look fun.
Yeah.
And let's want to reduce that to a phrase of freedom. Like the guy really just achieved more and more freedom and cared less and less about other people. And I think he's with a guy that rose in this generation that could have gone a lot of bad ways that you see in terms of harassment, abuse, and so forth. So far, we don't see much of it from Rodney, thank God. But the guy had great freedom to be himself and be inside of his own skin, and it seemed to get better as he went on and with each additional bathrobe that he purchased.
Would you tie those things together, that greater freedom because of service to his profession and younger comics? This is a real idea in 12 steps, right? That you get to experience joy and freedom yourself by being of service.
Yeah.
And he kind of stumbled into that in a way because he is more than I think anybody else of the last 50 years, a champion for younger comics and for like the art form itself. Even great comics who I love like Pryor and Carlin and Steve Martin, they may have mentored some people overall, but Rodney mentored a generation.
Yes.
To my point about creating space.
Yeah.
So my question is, would you tie that in with his journey of greater freedom with age?
Yes, I would tie it in. I wouldn't say it's the only ingredient.
Right.
But I would definitely tie it in.
I think it's an essential ingredient, though, or an important one.
Very much.
What's another ingredient, then?
Towards freedom or just towards why we want his life?
Yeah, towards why we want his life.
To me, it's, and this is overlaying a lot of myself on it, it's how busy he was. He used to very famously say, like, I hate actually doing movies and TV because they're just so damn slow. Right. It's like I'm in a trailer half the time and then I shoot for a minute and then I'm back in the trailer. And it's like, it's just so much standing around. I'd much rather be on stage. So this is a guy of impatience and a disdain for inaction.
There was a lot of activity.
There was a lot of activity, and with that comes flow.
Yeah.
And somebody that is as impatient, as quote-unquote fidgety as him, he found a way to both be in a profession and do things auxiliary to his profession and his personal life that constantly kept him busy, engaged, and connected.
That's very well said. I don't think I have much to add to that. I think the only other thing I'd say, to me, and maybe this is your point number one, I think he did figure it out. In as much as there's anything to figure out, there is no meaning of life. There is no great secret. Maybe it is all a joke, but he figured it out for him anyway, right? And I think that that's all you can ever hope for is to figure it out for yourself. Because, I don't know, we're looking for universal truths and we're looking for like one idea to unite us all. I think everybody's got to figure it out, but he figured it out.
Yeah. Let me ask one of you, because this is something that to me looks pretty good, but he had bad habits with the drinking and the smoking and the drugs, but he didn't really get into addiction. He didn't really get into any major trouble because of it.
Yeah.
So is that something to like want a life for? Is you sort of still got to enjoy what these sort of false chemically produced reactions
these
that do bring,
or these vices or whatever?
But whatever, they're still vehicles for enjoyment.
Yeah.
Right?
So is this an addiction question?
I'm saying, is it a good thing that you got to be a drinker and a smoker and still lived overweight well into your 80s?
I don't think it's a bad thing. I mean, when it comes to bad habits, vices, and even sort of getting into addictions, there is the damage to internal self, and then there's the damage to relationships and almost even a public health concern. And I do think, in as much as he had the tools, he participated to the best of his ability in interpersonal relationships. And I think he was capable of that. We're all imperfect. So on that level, I don't have any judgment or even, I don't know, and it's even kind of attractive. Look, I'm sober.
That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah,
it's still
this is my point about marijuana. I kind of, like, I love my sobriety. It's the most important thing in my life. No question about it. That said, I can look at somebody like Rodney Dangerfield who smokes a lot of pot and say, it looks pretty good.
Yeah.
And it's working for him. And he figured it out for him. So I'm able to divorce my own relationship to substances from somebody else's, I guess.
Yeah.
And I actually, in a funny way, don't see an addict here. I don't see an alcoholic here. And it's because of what I just spoke to. It's because I don't see it as having an undue toll on interpersonal relationships, as best I can tell.
Yeah. So I think throughout this whole episode, we saw a lot of bad stuff, a lot of midlife bad stuff.
Yeah.
But I think the case is there. And I started with freedom.
Yeah.
And then after that,
we also said service. Creating spaces, however you want to describe it.
Yeah, and then I said busyness as a lifestyle.
Yeah, and figuring it out. So, James Vanderbeek, I'm Rodney Dangerfield, and you want my life. All right, speed round here. Plugs for past episodes. Which episode does this one most remind you of?
I thought of a few. I'm going to go Fred Willard.
Oh, interesting.
Because very similar to their movie breakthroughs being in the early 80s and it happening in their 50s.
Yeah.
And both just funny as hell in different sorts of ways.
Yeah. I thought about Alan Rickman for that same reason, the post-40s. I think I actually am going to go Burt Reynolds. I'm not sure we totally nailed the truth of who Burt was in that episode, but I do think it's a different way of looking at his legacy and the sort of multi-generational historical figure in entertainment history.
Okay.
On the next episode of Famous and Gravy, she was married 3 times in all, and between marriages, she dated many prominent and powerful men, among them Senator John Warner of Virginia and the Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan.
Oh, I know this. That was Taylor. She's married more than that. Oh.
Famous and Gravy listeners, we love hearing from you. If you want to reach out to us with a comment, question, or participate in our opening quiz, you can email us at hello@famousandgravy.com. In our show notes, we include all kinds of links, including to our website and social channels. Famous and Gravy is created and co-hosted by Michael Osborne and me, Amit Kapoor. This episode was produced by Megan Palmer and original music by Kevin Strang. See you next time.
Follow Famous and Gravy on the Wondery app. You can listen to more episodes early and ad-free right now by joining Wondery Plus in the Wondery app, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify. Before you go, tell us about yourself by completing a short survey at Wondery.com/survey.